Hello, welcome to another episode of Deck Musings. So we're up to this period in Standard, July the 1st, 2000 to October the 31st, 2000. And it's interesting because once we get past here into November, so next week, we would have lost a whole load of cards because the Urza block rotates out and we start adding in invasion block every sort of quarter-ish. So yeah, at this point we are at our sort of fullest period card-wise because we've got all of Urza block, all of Mercadian Mask block and 6th edition, and then of course we'll lose Urza's and we'll just get the first set of the next block invasion. You get a little bit of pulsing as well because at some point, and this doesn't happen until 2001, we'll see the next core set come in because core sets came and went every 2 years. So you can sort of see that sometimes when that happens, as those are moving in and out, you get almost like a secondary pulse or an increase in the card pool, just depending on the balance of the cards and what's coming in and what's going out at that point. Because it looks like the introduction of the next core set at this point in Magic's history doesn't always exactly line up with a whole block going out, so that's why you get that, almost like twice yearly blip in the card pool size. So yeah, we're here and we're going to take a look at this deck this week, Tinker, because we had a World Championship in August, so yeah, in this period, so July, August was the World Championship, September, October, and then we get Invasion coming in this big rotation here. So yeah, the winner was John Finkel, so we'll actually be looking at the John Finkel deck. He played Tinker here. Also, because it's a World Championship, we have a deck that was released because in this time period from 97 through to 2004, every year Wizards were releasing these World Championship decks. There were 4 of them and they're all gold coloured borders, and for this year's one they did the winning deck alongside 3 quarter-finalist decks. So we have Mono Blue Tinker, which is the deck we're looking at. An explosive mono blue deck used artifacts such as Grim Monolith, Metalworker and Voltaic Key to generate huge amounts of mana. The mana in turn put large creatures into play to finish off stunned opponents. The namesake of this, Tinker, also played a pretty considerable part here when you'll see the card. If you're not familiar with it, you know what I mean. We also got a red-green deck, Angry Non-Hermit, where is it? There's my lands. So yeah, Islands, Plains, Rishadan Port and Adakar Way. So white, blue, and that was a replenish deck. And then a Chimera deck. You can see slightly more involved in terms of the lands here. So we've got Brushlands in here, we've got City of Brass, Forest, High Market, Phyrexian Tower, Thran Quarry. There's actually, in terms of the options for non-basic lands, there's quite a large choice here because of the presence of all of the sets, including, you know, reprints in 6th edition and various lands that came up in the Urza block, and we've seen some lands in Mercadian Masks as well. So lots of stuff. So let's look at the Tinker deck. A lot of artifacts in here. Not just artifacts, but artifact creatures. So we'll go through this. Some of these we would have seen before in previous episodes, because a number of these artifacts have been popular in previous decks when Urza's cards were you know, legal. And of course we're quite deep in now as well, because since the original Urza saga, you've got, you know, 2 other sets in the block. You've got the core set, and you've got 3 other sets in the following block. So, you know, these have had quite a lot of opportunity to turn up in tournament decks. This is a standard deck, by the way, because this particular World Championship, and obviously the timing is such that that happens, is you're going to see like the full block Mercadian Masks Nemesis Prophecy in Standard alongside the Urza's block as well. So it gets picked from a lot of different stuff, and in here you can see there is some Mercadian Masks stuff. Tinker actually comes from Urza block, and you can see we've got stuff in here from 6th edition. There's stuff in here from Nemesis, but I don't think this deck actually contains any prophecy cards. I don't think. Yeah, so no actual prophecy cards in here, which is unfortunate, seeing as that's the set that did rotate in. But I wanted to pick Tinker because, yeah, it's such an interesting deck, and although we've seen heavy artifact decks before because of Tolarian Academy, it's interesting to see this style of deck. So 4 Voltaic Keys, 1 to cast, 1 tap, untap target artifact. 2 Grim Monoliths, 4 Grim Monoliths, 2 to cast, doesn't untap during your untap phase. If it is untapped, then you add 3 colourless mana to your mana pool, play this ability as a mana source, 4 to untap it. Tangle Wire from Nemesis, 4 of those, 3 to cast, has fading 4, so it comes into play with 4 fade counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove a fade counter from it. If you can't, you sacrifice it. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player taps an untapped artifact, creature or land he or she controls for each fade counter on Tangle Wire. So taps an untapped artifact. Phyrexian Processor, 4 of those, 4 to cast, comes into play, pay any amount of life, 4 and tap, put a minion token into play. Treat this token as a black creature with power and toughness each equal to the amount of life paid at the time Phyrexian Processor came into play. Thran Dynamo, 4 of those, 4 to cast, tap, add 3 colourless mana to your mana pool. 1 Crumbling Sanctuary, so 5 to cast, for each 1 damage that will be dealt to a player, that player removes the top card of his or her library from the game instead. And 1 Mishra's Helix, 5 to cast, X tap, X lands. So you've got a bit of control going on here from artifacts, but you'll see in a moment how some of these artifacts can be used as a fuel for the deck. We've got 9 creatures in the deck, 4 Metalworkers, 3 to cast. There are 1/2. Tap, reveal any number of artifact cards in your hand. Add 2 colourless mana to your mana pool for each card revealed this way. 4 Masticores, 4 to cast. There are 4/4. At the beginning of upkeep, you may choose and discard a card from your hand. If you don't, sacrifice Masticore. 2 Masticore deals 1 damage to target creature, and for 2 you can regenerate it. And then we have this Phyrexian Colossus. So one of these, it's a 7 to cast it. It's an 8/8. So what's the downside? Well, it doesn't untap during your untap phase. You have to pay 8 life to untap it. And Phyrexian Colossus cannot be blocked by fewer than 3 creatures. However, we do have a Voltaic Key in the deck. We have 4 Brainstorms. So 1 blue, draw 3 cards and put 2 cards from your hand on the top of your library in any order. We have 21 lands in the deck, 9 islands, 4 crystal veins, and this, as you can see, was from 6th edition. Tap it, add 1 colourless mana to your mana pool. Tap, sacrifice it, add 2 colourless mana to your mana pool. We've got 4 Rishadan Ports, so tap, add 1 colourless to your mana pool, 1 tap target land, and then a Saprazzan Skerry from Mercadian Masks, and this is one of those depletion lands. It's the blue one, so they come into play tapped with 2 depletion counters on it. If you remove a depletion counter from Saprazzan Skerry, you add 2 blue mana to your mana pool. If there's no depletion counters on Saprazzan Skerry, sacrifice it. And finally, in the main deck, we have 4 Tinkers. So 2 in a blue. At the time you play Tinker, you sacrifice an artifact. But you get to search your library for an artifact and put that artifact into play and shuffle your library afterwards. So you can see there's a number of cards here that would be nice if you could do that. Yeah. Sideboard wise, we've got 4 Annuls, 1 blue, counter target artifact or enchantment spell, chill, 1 in the blue, red spells cost 2 more to play, miscalculation, there's 4 of those, there's also 4 chills in the deck, so 4 miscalculations, they're 1 in a blue, counter target spell unless its caster pays an additional 2. It's got cycling 2 on it as well, so you may pay 2 and discard this card from your hand to draw a card, play this ability as an instant. Rising Waters, so 3 in a blue, lands don't untap during their controller's untap steps at the beginning of each player's upkeep. That player untaps a land he or she controls. We saw that last week, I think. And 1 Mishra's Helix, 5 to cast, X tap, and then tap X lands, and that's basically and in addition to the one that's already in the deck. So as you can see here, most of the sideboard is cards that aren't already in the deck apart from the Mishra's Helix. So yeah, these are for specific matchups. Okay, so let's go through the individual cards in the deck from the main deck through to the sideboard cards and just see what rabbit holes we end up down in terms of functionality wise, as we do in all these episodes. So pretty straightforward here. We've got islands in the deck. These are the artwork for the set. Very nice mountainous islands there. So 4 pieces of artwork. I'll do all the land first. Rishadan Port. It's interesting, this crops up quite a few times in various decks, both in the World Championship decks this year and the following year. And you can see there's interesting land control here without destroying a land. You can also do one colourless manage your mana pool if you want to, instead of tapping down a target land. So, we've looked at this before, and let's just see if there's any interesting rabbit holes we can go down. So it mirrors Deserted Temple. So you can see Deserted Temple is one tap, untapped target land. And this wasn't until a later set, slightly later set. Also, and we did look at this the previous week, it's attached to, it's an ability that's attached to Rishadan Dockland. And there are tons of tappers in Magic's history. So yeah, anything that taps something. But we've looked at this card before, so I'm not going to spend too much time going back over old ground. Saprazzan Skerry. So these are these depletion lands. Cycle of these from Akkadian Masks. But you might remember that there was something similar-ish. Well, say that's so. In terms of what it does, but in a different way. So both of these come into play tapped. This one doesn't use depletion counters. You can, with this one, you can tap it for regular mana. That's Phyrexian Temple I'm talking about. And you can tap and sacrifices to get 2 blue added to your mana pool. With this one, what happens is it comes into play tap with the counters on it. You can see there's no way of actually just generating regular, 1 blue mana by just tapping it. You have to tap it to remove a depletion counter. And so you're going to get, because there's 2 depletion counters here, you're going to get 2 goes with it. And both times you'll be able to generate 2 blue mana. So this one, I think, well, again, you see with this one, it's up to you when you choose to sacrifice it to get that spurt of blue mana. So potentially this one can generate more mana because you can just sit there generating the blue mana each turn if you want to. With this one, you get the mana spurt quickly or quicker in that once it's untapped, you can do it, but beyond that you get one other go and you got to sacrifice it. Unless, of course, you can find a way of adding counters on here. And this is, of course, something that more comes in later in Magic's history when you get into the era of proliferate, those sort of things. But as such, because of this spurt of mana, it is classed as ramp. And you have alliteration is a tag, adds multiple mana, which, we have looked at that before. I'm just trying to think of things here, interesting rabbit holes we can go down. Cycle land, cycle monoland, tap land, card names. If I just go into here, just going to revisit this, and I think we've looked at this in a previous episode. Please. Counters on land. Yeah. But I don't really want it to be talking about +1/+1 counters. So if I net off is that going to work? There we go. So yeah, these ones here, this is what I was trying to think of. Fallen Empire had the storage counters. Ice Age had these depletion counters, but they were used, so it says if there are any depletion counters on land cap, it does not untap during your untap phase. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove a depletion counter from land cap. So this one is interesting in that the depletion counters are used in a slightly different way than the ones from Mercadian Masks. Gemstone Mine had mining counters. There was also this other cycler uncommon for Mercadian Masks which had storage counters. And now you could put the storage counters back on. Myrddin's Core had charge counters. There's going to be some here which mention countering or not countering abilities or being uncounterable, which will muddy the water a little bit. Tender Ice Bridge had charge counters. Dark Depths, of course, used these ice counters. And as they were removed, eventually it would spit out this indestructible legendary 2020 black avatar creature once you got down to no ice counters. And then we had an interesting cycle from Time Spiral which had these charge counters that could be used to generate combinations of two colours. Gemstone Cavern used luck counters in a certain way, like conditional. And then we have the Vivids. So these were monocoloured, but you could, or they generated monocolour mana by tapping them, but you could tap them to remove a charge counter and then you could generate mana of any colour. That was interesting. I came in with 2 charge counters. There's something from Zendikar, this Margosi, the Water Veil, which uses Eon counters. And this was talking about something not being countered, so that doesn't really count. A pressure counter on Helion Crucible. And then again, sort of random things here again. Okay, so storage counters. Oh, this is -1, so that doesn't really count. Charge counters, landmark counters. So yeah, all these different types of counters. But you can see there's quite a number of both storage counters and depletion counters that have been used through Magic's history. Okay, Metalworker. Let's have a look at this. Obviously you can see there it is a mana dork, and you generate additional mana or generate 2 colourless mana there by revealing artifact cards in your hand. Well, this deck has a lot of artifacts in it, so that shouldn't be too much of a problem. We've looked at adding multiple mana before, has synergy with artifacts. And Mana Dork covers a multitude of things. Generally, it refers to low-cost creatures which can repeatedly generate mana. And this is 3 to cast. So. Interesting there what they classify as a low cost. If we put this in casting cost order, or mana value as they call it, that's funny. So here you can see it's basically anything actually that generates mana. So not really strictly the definition here. Okay, this is expensive. So in terms of the casting cost, 7 to cast, it's an 8/8. Let's see what we've got. Doesn't untap, life payment, untap self, super menace. Oh, I see, yeah. Phyrexian Colossus cannot be blocked by fewer than 3 creatures because you can't get more menacing than menace. Okay. Yeah, that's a drawback. And you can see there's quite a number of cards which don't untap during, in this case you got during a untap step, but they have ways and means of untapping them. But as you can see, it's not a lot of cards that do that. I suppose they have to be a little bit careful because a number of these, if it wasn't for the they don't untap during the untap phase, and there was some additional way or alternate way to untap them, there may be the tapping is reining in their power. And so there might well be ways of cheating them into play in such a way that not being able to untap during your untap step and then having a costly ability to do that can be circumvented, or they can be got out a little bit earlier than they would usually be. So that downside, it isn't such a major issue. You got probably loads of stuff that has life payment. Crumbling Sanctuary. For each 1 damage that will be dealt to a player, that player removes a card of his or her library from the game instead. This is a type of card I don't think we've seen that much before. So here we have seen leash effects. We've got mill with exile. So mill exile. Exile cards from the top of the library. 102 taggings. Milling anything. 156. And leash effect. Effects which turn damage into the loss of cards or permanents. And there we have a leash, or the leash, or lich, however you want to say it. So let's look at some of these things that mill to exile. Okay. Just give us I want to get some idea of how much this crops up in Magic's history, but also on artifacts. So we've got a pretty dramatic effect on Jace here in blue. You can see it's happening a lot on blue cards. Also got it on some Eldrazi. And in this period as well, all these devoid cards. And that was wasn't that the period in Magic where it got a little bit easier to interact with stuff that was in exile? So there were a lot more cards there that were sticking stuff into, exiling stuff, so they could then be utilised. It's interesting artwork. What's the most recent card with this sort of thing on it? Oh yeah, it's the Jurassic World stuff. So it looks like there's been a interesting change here, if you notice with these. If we go back, we've had initially a number of artifact cards that did that, and then it sort of slowly moved away. We have this, which is, there are no artifacts there. Quite a lot of them are devoid, and then really most things going forward are not either colourless or colourless because they're or devoid of colour, or artifacts. I also saw one of my favourites here, Scribnibblers. 2 in a black, 1/1, tap, exile the top card of target player's library. If it's a land card, you gain 1 life. A landfall, whenever a land is battlefield under your control, you may untap Scribnibblers. Okay, Grim Monolith. What have we got here? Add some multiple mana, doesn't untap, so another one with the not untapping during your untap phase. Has the abilities to obviously untap itself, or has some mechanism to do that. In this case it's mana. Basalt Monolith. 3 mana, 3 untap. So what's this? This is 2 to cast with 4 to untap. Comes into play. Sorry, it doesn't untap during your untap phase. So it comes into play untapped. So there's no problem there. But once you tap it, you can't untap it without this or some other mechanism, like the Voltaic Key. Basalt Monolith. 3 to cast as opposed to 2, but less to untap. Yeah. So Mishra's Helix, X tap, X lands, a land tapper, we've seen these before, Floodwater Dam, XX on 1 tap, X target lands. It's cool artwork. Deforestation. Okay. Phyrexian Processor. Yep, turned up quite a number of those World Championship decks. It was also in this as well, with different artwork. Okay, all sorts of things here. Payment repeatable token generator. Creature type erratum. Unprinted tokens, so those apparently were never printed as tokens. Similar to Riptide Replicator. Riptide's cool because you can generate where is it? Yeah, tokens of any colour and type. So you choose a colour and a creature type. The X is in the casting cost on that. On this one, it's in the fact that you pay a certain amount of life. So what's the fun ruling? Okay, those managers having fun with this. Fair enough. So apparently 86 cards have unprinted tokens. This always makes me chuckle. Boris Devil Boon. Yeah, there's quite a number of cards with repeatable token generators on them. Minion of the Wastes. So Tangle Wire, this fading 4 on it. Definitely going to have a look at this actually fading. So yeah, Prison. You can see there's 24 cards. You can argue that it's not a fun thing to have in Magic, so it's something they're not going to do that often. Oops. So you can see there's quite a number of earlier cards here. And then we've got, things like Propaganda, Ensnaring Bridge, Sphere of Resistance. There's Tangle Wire, Chalice of the Void, of course, and then things like Trinity Spear and Ghostly Prison. but yeah, not a ton here tagged up with that, and that's a good thing. So yeah, lots of tappity tap stuff here. Thran Dynamo. And you can see it's cropped up in the Arch Enemy product, the original one, and a couple of Commander decks as well, alongside a few sort of special sets. Scepter of Eternal Glory. That's interesting. Better than Sissy's Ring, yep. So that's 4 with 2 mana. This is 4 with 3. Oh yeah, Urgolem's Eye. 4 with 2. That's been in a Commander deck as well. Yeah, Urgolem's Eye. Yeah, I mean, there's a number of cards in Magic's history that add multiple mana, and I'm sure we've done this before. Always interesting when you see it on artifacts, because of course it can be used in if it's like a a colourless artifact, then it can end up in any deck regardless of the colour. I wonder what the most amount of mana that's sort of generated by these sort of things. 3 colourless, 3, 2, 2, 2. Does it max out at 3? I suppose. Well, this one just depends on how many charge counters you have on it, really. Of course, same to ever-flowing chalice, of course, yeah. So, where it does go above 3, then it looks like it is where they're using some, system involving counters to increase that. Just looking to see if I can see anything that, say, mentions specifically 4. Oh, hang on, there we go. 5 mana. I think is that the maximum? I mean, we've got obviously Wooburg ones here, but that's a form of filtering, I suppose. Filter ramp. And there's another one. Does 5 mana for Wooburg. So does it max out of that? Yeah. So nothing above 5 unless it's being done with some sort of counters or variations thereof. There's our Voltaic Key. We've seen this numerous times. Great way of untapping tapped stuff and obviously particularly useful in this deck where we've got quite a lot of stuff that's coming into play tapped. Similar to Manifold Key and Galvanic Key, and it's on Voltaic Servant, slightly different form. Beginning of your end step, untap target artifact, and the whole thing of artifact untappers. 37 of those. Artifact untappers that are themselves artifacts. 13. If you want to go further than that and see ones that are completely colourless, and that's what we're left with. Clock of Omens, Dross Scorpion, Galvanic Key, Manifold Key, Mobile Garrison, Sands of Time, Unwinding Clock, Voltaic Construct, Voltaic Key, and Voltaic Servant. Now I'm curious about things named Voltaic. So Voltaic Construct, Voltaic Key, Voltaic Servant, and there's a Voltaic Brawler and a Voltaic Visionary. And while we're at it, what about Galvanic? 10 cards which have Galvanic somewhere in the name. But there's not really a... Just trying to see if there's a commonality here. Don't really see it. And Tinker. Not surprisingly, banned in Legacy, banned in Commander, banned in Oathbreaker. I think you can see why. 2 to cast. At the time you play Tinker, sacrifice an artifact, search your library for an artifact card and put that artifact into play. Shuffle your library afterwards. And yeah, you can see here as we go, it's not even legal in any other format because they're all time sensitive or rarity sensitive, conditions on rarity. So the only format it is playable in is Vintage, and it's restricted there. So what do we have? Do we have anything similar? So what do we got? Sacrifice outlet, because you think of the power, you know, you've got an artifact tutor and it's tutoring to the battlefield. So we'll have a look at tutor artifacts. Sack outlet artifact as well. Synergy with artifacts. Tutor to battlefield. Tutor artifact. What's this? References. Regenerate target artifact creature. Oh, here. Choice time bug, yeah. So, through that reference. So tutoring artifacts. There's quite a number of those. So artifact tutors that what's the best way to look at this? artifact card, reveal it, put it into your hand. So do any of these end up... I can do this a couple of ways, but let's just see what we got. Oh, we had a look at it. Did we ever look at it quite before? Search target opponent's library for an artifact card and put that into play under your control. And the player shuffles it here or like that. I think came up in just as a card in a previous Commander fodder. So we've got check the wording on that battlefield. Yeah, this does it in a slightly roundabout way, and you've got to pay. Is there anything remotely close? Oops. I mean, I'm aware of cards that have like some sort of limit on the mana cost of the artifact in question, like things like, you know, Trinket Mage. And Treasure Mage, but it's going into hand. Yeah, so they've just got it there because they've got ETB effects. It might be better for me to look at it from a point of view of tutor into the battlefield. And then I suppose I could have put both tags on there as well. That might have been a better way to do it. Yeah, so we've got a condition there tied to the casting cost. And this one you have to sacrifice 3 artifacts. Yeah, so this one it's conditional on mana cost. Another one with a condition on there on the cost. There's a cut off there. So yeah, higher cost and more artifacts. Should be able to do that. Let's see whether that works. Made a little bit of a difference. Got rid of 4 cards. Moving on. Brainstorm. Abandoned Historic. We've seen this card before. Interesting, you know, different artwork in Macadian masks. And we've seen all the things here that it's obviously worse than an Ancestral Recall. Similar to Preordain. And similar to a Ponder. Just the sort of order in which they do things, and the shenanigans in how you end up with a card. Referenced by Brainstorm. So you can see basically any card that has a Brainstorm ability on it. Crystal Vein, 6th edition, it's a reprint from Mirage. We've definitely seen this card before on several occasions now. Adds multiple mana. It's a soul land. If you've not seen any of the episodes where I've covered these sort of cards before, you can probably see here how that tag comes about. So you can see they're all here generating 2 colourless mana, rather like a soul ring, but these are lands, so hence the term soul land. Got an Annul in here, counter target artifact or enchantment spell, so blue's way of dealing with artifacts and enchantments. Did turn up in Theros and Kaldheim as well. Exemplary counterspell. The counterspell that calls out enchantments specifically. So there are actually 9 cards which counter enchantments. You can see there's Defabricate there. And 11 that specifically deal with artifacts. So in terms of stuff that does both, there are 4. So Annul, Defabricate, Illumination, and Quandrix Command. Again, if we're looking at this on a timeline, but of course on top of that you have cards which just say counter target spell, so they deal with these types as well. But I was just curious of, you know, where you have a blue equivalent of, was it Disenchant? Interesting in white, which is what the same colour that Disenchant is in. You have this illumination, which counts as a target artifact or enchantment spell. That spell's caster gains an amount of life equal to the spell's casting cost. Now we've got this green-blue card, instant speed. And it's modal, so it can either bounce creatures or planeswalker, counter artifacts or enchantment spells, but you get to choose 2. So out of 4, put 2 +1/+1 counters on a target creature. Target player shuffles up to 3 target cards from their graveyard into the library. So you can see actually it's pretty clear here that the demarcation between the green stuff down the bottom and the blue stuff here. And then we have Defabricate, which is modal, but you only get to choose 1, and you can either use it to counter an artifact or enchantment spell, but you exile it actually, and then counter target activated or triggered ability as the alternative mode. So as you can see now, we've been getting into the sideboard. In the cards we looked at here are sideboard cards. Down this end of the tabs, we've got Chill. So it's a fairly common concept in Magic, is targeting specific colours of spell, making them more costly to pay, or anything else really. So you've got this cost increase of type spell, and you can spot here, you know, where there's certain things that it might be going after beyond certain colours of spell. There might be certain types of card that are specific to certain themes within a set or a block. It might be in there to deal with something potentially problematic earlier in the meta, in an earlier set. But yeah, lots of reasons why they might include this card. And we have the leeches. But that's not to say it won't work against you. So you can see here on the leeches, it's saying, so we've got Alabaster Leech. White spells you play cost white more to play. So it's 1/3 for 1. And that's its downside. Sapphire Leech, 1 and a blue for 2/2, so 2/2 for 2. But with flying, the downside is that any blue spells that you play cost blue more to cast, and so on through the various colours. So, you know, a number of these are using this cost increaser, not on everybody or on an opponent, but specifically on you, to counteract the or to balance out the fact that the card might have something powerful about it, which if it went unchecked might be too powerful. So you're going to see a mixed bag here. You can see there Elderwood Sign. So 3 green white 4/4 with trample and lifelink. Spells you cast that target Elderwood Sign costs 2 less to cast. So that's something that's in this case advantageous to you, but the downside here is for your opponent. Spells your opponents cast the target elder would sign costs 2 more to cast. And of course we also see that here it's because cards have, you know, an additional cost, but we've seen quite a few cards where it'll actually reduce the cost. The only reason that's here, where cost reducer, is because there's a cost increaser on it. If we were looking at spells that affect the casting cost either way, then we have a lot more here. I wonder if it is just a question of, let's try this quickly. Logically the tab would be that for the cost reducers. Yeah. So we've got all the medallions as a contrast. And then, because that's how this happened, if I do this, that's ones that both increase and decrease. God, so we've gone off at a bit of a side tangent here, but I saw this and thought it was interesting. It's got both on it. Grand Arbiter. There's a few interesting legendaries here. Yeah, there's a good one I was talking about earlier, where this one affects flashback costs. Miscalculation. Counter target spell unless its caster pays an additional, so another one of these additional casting cost things. It doesn't specifically mention it there, but that's under the counter spell soft category, where it gives the player a chance to buy off the counter. And we've certainly seen this type of card quite a number of times before, and it's on this cycle of Seers as well. The blue one specifically. Mishra's Helix we've already looked at, and then Rising Waters we did look at it a previous week, but let's just have a look in case you haven't watched last week's video. So you locking down lands, and you can see here it's actually affecting everybody. Symmetrical. It's on Hakori. And fortunately again we see a number of, or not a lot of, should I say, got it around the wrong way, yeah. Stasis cards. Yeah, not so much of a thing, fortunately. It's pretty miserable to play against. And of course stasis on a commander. Not fun. But I was quite interested by, you know, like locking down certain lands. This we saw in a No Hand, No Land episode. This is also, this would have been in standard at that time, it's the 6th edition. Another choose not to untap. And just see, it might come up with similar things that we've been talking about in this week's episode, but I am still curious, so let's have a look. You can see the option to choose to not untap is on quite a number of cards. $44 here. And yeah, I suppose was that the first time we saw it really was Old Man of the Sea. So you can see basically most of these here are locking down something for as long as the card's tapped. And then you get to, once you untap it, the lock's gone. The other thing is on these lands where you can choose not to untap it and put something else on it instead, like in this case a storage counter. Got the Dalkin Shackles. Does that look suspiciously like a cycle, maybe? Yeah. Cycle of Couriers. Or which have that you may choose not to untap during the untap step. So what do they give? Oh, I see. Okay. It's all targeting particular creature types. So elves, goblins, zombies, wizards, soldiers. All +2/+2. And is that another ability as well? Yeah, green's trample, red's haste, black is fear, blue is, what's that, shroud? And white would be vigilance. Interesting. It's amazing the stuff you just uncover sometimes when you go down these rabbit holes. All from looking at lockdown lands. So cards that lock down themselves in order that they can do something else, either lock down something else or buff something else or give it some sort of ability that's helpful. These pause counters. You may choose not to untap Grand Marshal Macy during your untapped step. If you do put a pause counter on it, then you lose 1 life for each pause counter on it. When it becomes untapped, remove all pause counters. 2 tap, choose an until end of turn or this turn effect. Okay. Oh yeah, the Helm of Possession. Although you do have to sack a creature as well. We've got Coffin Queen, 2 and a black, 1/1. You may choose not to untap Coffin Queen during your untap phase. 2 and a black, put target creature from any graveyard into play under your control. Remove that creature from the game if Coffin Queen becomes untapped, or if you lose control of Coffin Queen. Any graveyard. This is the scale. Was that? Wasn't there? No. A very specific theft card. The other interesting thing here, I wonder if this is going to come from the tag. So this is pseudo equipment. Before equipment arrived in Mirrodin, experimented with a number of effects. And the one I was trying to think, it's not here actually. Granted boost that stuck but could not be transferred. Oops. Would help if I had a space, eh? It's curious again. What do we got? Just looking at the set here. So antiquities. Bit of it in Fallen Empires. Urza Saga, Legacy, and then Nemesis. And the Cycling Onslaught, which we already had a look at. And then this single one in Champions. Now, of course, there are other artifacts which do something slightly different in that they turn into a creature or something rather than impart, equipment-like ability onto a card. Effects are granted, they grant some sort of boost. Because I'm sure you can think of things like, there's a scimitar, isn't there, that like that, which is, I think, a little bit more like a creature, really. Was it dancing scimitar? Yeah, dancing scimitar. So it's a 1/5 with flying. So yes, it's looks like a sword, but it's actually a spirit. So not equipment. And then you have those other artifacts which can change their sort of state into lots of different things. I don't know if they don't have. They're not. There's no totems like that, is there? Oh yeah, maybe. That wasn't necessarily the one I was thinking of, but yeah, there's a few here that do that sort of thing. Okay, cool. I think I'll leave it at that. So that was interesting to take a look at the, see what rabbit holes we go down as a result of this Tinker deck, and you can certainly see why, when we looked at this, the legality now of, what it could be played in. It's pretty minute. So thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I'll catch you in a future episode.